Today I'm going to show you how to create this matte finish look with a rhinestone name. I think the end result is super stunning and I can't wait to show you how to create this. So let's get started. We are going to start by grabbing our favorite tumbler style from our favorite tumbler supplier, which is the Tipsy Magnolia. We are going to grab an 80 grit sanding block and give it a really good sand, concentrating on those top and bottom rims where they are most vulnerable. You really want to give this a good sand. If you are sanding and not seeing little teeny tiny scratches all over, then you probably need to go to a higher grit. Once that is all sanded and prepped, just take a dry paper towel and rub away that extra dust. Then grab your paint of choice. I use chalk paint, but you can use spray paint as well. And then we are going to let that completely dry. Once your paint is completely dry, you're going to add a layer of epoxy to your tumbler and let that cure. You also are going to cut out the name you want on your tumbler in a coordinating vinyl to your rhinestones. I chose Crystal AB rhinestones, so I just cut her name out of a dark gray color. I now am going to take my Cami Page Boutique Ultimate Tumbler tool and make a line going vertically up my tumbler with a water-based marker, or you could use a dry erase marker. We now are going to use that straight line up our tumbler as a guide to make sure that this decal going up the tumbler is straight. If you've done this before, this can be a little bit of a challenge. And if it gets off a little bit, you can tell once you set the cup straight up and down. So you really want to make sure their name is on there as straight as possible. Now, if this is a water-based marker, you can just take a little bit of a wet paper towel and rub off that extra marker. And then we are going to take this tumbler back over to our turner and apply a layer of epoxy. Once that epoxy has cured, we are going to matte out this tumbler. This is a cheap alternative I get on Amazon, but I know there's plenty out there that are also great. I also like the Mattify from Artistry, but all I do is take some on a paper towel, and I just rub circular, I rub up and down, and then I rub side to side. This might take a couple times to get it as matte as you want it, but I just rub it until all of that pink stuff is pretty much gone, and then I'll add a little bit more. One thing I want to add is make sure your epoxy is good and cured before you move on to this step. So if you used a fast set, you should probably be good the next day, but if you are using a slower cure epoxy, you may need to wait a few days until you mattify it out. Once you have achieved the matte finish you are looking for, take this to your sink, and I just washed mine with some Dawn dish soap and water and let it dry completely. Now I am going to start collecting my supplies for the rhinestones. Today I am using Bob Smith's 2-part epoxy, and I'm just going to make equal daubs on this sticky notepad and stir that in really well and mix it up with this little micro brush I got on Amazon. And then I am going to grab my picker up tool, which are just some wax sticks from Amazon. And then I have a multi-pack of the crystal AB stones from Diamond Fire Rhinestones, and I have just put them in this little sorter. Now we are going to take just a little bit of that Bob Smith epoxy and I'm kind of tapping it on here. I don't really want to spread it on too thick because I don't want it to push out the side of my rhinestone. So I'm just being really careful with that little micro brush and kind of painting on right where the decal is. A nice little tip is to make sure you have some Q-tips and a paper towel handy along with some 91% alcohol, just in case you get an epoxy smudge like I did. Wipe that off as soon as you find it to keep that matte finish. I'm only going to apply small sections of epoxy onto the name of the tumbler. This is just what I feel comfortable with working in that amount of time. These are some smaller rhinestones that I am applying in the scatter method. That is just my go-to favorite method. I just like the look of it. So they are ranging from, I believe, SS3s, which is teeny tiny, all the way up to SS8s, maybe 10s. I can't remember what I threw in this tray here. And we're just going to kind of apply them like a puzzle, following the font on your name. So obviously a smaller stone in the thinner sections, and you can apply the bigger stones in the bigger sections and just fill it in the best you can. I would say a really good tip is I don't go all the way to the outline outside of the font, the name. I kind of keep my stones right inside that vinyl. That's what gives you kind of more of a crisp, clean look. When you work with an epoxy, they do tend to kind of slide around a little bit. So right here, I am just taking my wax tool and going back and making sure they haven't slid out of place. Once you have finished that section of epoxy, we are just going to continue mixing up really small batches. I use the same little micro brush a few times, even though it's getting a little bit gummy, until I feel that I can't use it anymore and it's just not small enough to get in those small sections, and then I will just throw it away and grab a new one. Just keep picking up a little bit of epoxy at a time, and you can either dab or try to rub it on. It just depends on how thick or thin the name is on your tumbler. I tend to kind of like to dab it in the smaller sections, and then I can kind of rub it in the thicker sections. When you are applying your stones, you may start to notice that some of the epoxy is kind of pushing outside of your lines and it doesn't look as clean and crisp as you would like. A little bit is okay. It is an imperfect product and it's really hard to control, but if there is a little bit more than you feel comfortable with, just take your Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol and clean up around the rhinestones you just placed, and then that will keep around the tumbler matte and then clean up all that excess that wanted to spill out past your rhinestones. Just keep applying that small amount of epoxy to the name on your tumbler and adding your rhinestones. Then you will finally get to the end where you are on your last letter and you get to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I did a giveaway in my mentorship group, and Brittany doesn't know this yet, but she is the lucky winner of this tumbler. I told them if they trusted me and would like to win a tumbler from me to enter, and if they didn't trust me, then don't enter. I just had them put their favorite color and a name they would like on the tumbler, and Brittany is the lucky winner. I am so obsessed with this tumbler. I almost legally changed my name to Brittany. Now take your tumbler and give it a once over and make sure that you got all of the epoxy cleaned up around the rhinestones, or maybe where you have touched some epoxy and a fingerprint or two. Take your Q-tip and rubbing alcohol and clean that all up. Once you have it looking all beautiful and perfect, let that epoxy and rhinestones cure for a few days. Once that epoxy has cured for a few days, we are going to give her a little bit of a scrub. I am just taking some dish soap and a little scrubby brush, and we're just going to gently scrub those rhinestones to get off any excess wax that may have been left from your wax picker up tool. And then I am just going to rinse off that soap and pat her dry with a paper towel. And here she is, all finished. I hope Brittany loves her tumbler as much as I do. I just adore this look with the matte finish, but the super sparkly rhinestones. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. And look for me on all other social media platforms under Diamonds and Dust, and give me a follow there too.